All right, well, let's go now. Let's go into your takedown of Rachel Maddow. All right, so I'm going to read your thread, and you can stop me whenever you want. So here's Rachel Maddow's original tweet. Death by algorithm. The YouTube recommended Russia Today for understanding. I mean, so how could I have watched Rachel Maddow for, I don't know, close to 10 years? Mm-hmm. No, when did she get that job? 2010. So about 5 years I watched her. And she was really good, I thought. What was I missing?
I used to be a big fan too. I used to be a big fan as well. You know, I think she's very talented, is a great broadcaster. Once she seemed to have principles and seemed to care about progressive causes. I remember her covering Flint in depth when other people were ignoring it. So there was a time when I thought, I mean, you know, she was always constrained inside the corporate media bubble, inside the cable news bubble. But still, I thought there was a time when even within those constraints, she did a somewhat decent job. But then 2016 happened, and she turned into a unhinged conspiracy theorist and a Russophobe. I mean, really kind of ginning up this like anti-Russia sentiment and presenting Russians as this existential threat to the country, which she's still doing.
Would you say it's equivalent to the fear-mongering Trump does with Mexicans as she does with Russians? I would.
Yeah, I think you can draw a line there. And also it reminds me of what Glenn Beck and all them used to do with Barack Obama and birtherism. You know, this fear-mongering about Obama was from a foreign country and all the conspiracy theories that they would go through to try to substantiate their false claim about Obama. I mean, what Maddow has done for over 2 years is every night spin these crazy tales about Putin controlling Trump. And I go through it in the thread about, Putin being responsible for getting Rex Tillerson hired and then also fired, Putin being responsible for Trump hiring Paul Manafort, Putin getting Trump to weaken the State Department, to weaken the FBI. I mean, all these crazy things. I mean, that's what it's come down to. And, who knows what's going on in someone's mind, but what she's doing is a, encapsulation of this overall pathology that's afflicted liberal culture in general for the last 2+ years, where Russia has been blamed for a very American phenomenon. In fact, an exclusively American phenomenon, which is the rise of Donald Trump. But it's like this refusal to accept that Donald Trump is our creation has led people like Maddow to peddle this nonsense that it's the fault and even the direct result of a conspiracy with Russia.
The only thing that I would disagree with you on there, Aaron, and look, I'm very proud. It's a very exciting moment for me that I get to disagree with you over something. Is that you said this is an American phenomenon, Donald Trump? I don't think it is. We had Mark Blythe on, who is the political economist, and he explained that it's not a local event, that Trump is not a local event. It has a lot to do with Brexit, a lot to do with Greece, a lot to do with what's happening in Italy. And so it's neoliberalism is crashing. What neoliberalism basically is capitalism, right? So it's unbridled capitalism, which is failing worldwide right now. And I think Trump is a symptom of that. And that system has not only in the United States, it's also in Europe, and it's worldwide right now. Neoliberalism, which is corporatism, which is free markets. And remember, there's no such thing as a free market. Markets are invented by guys who have stuff that they want to sell, and they need rules to protect themselves. They're not rules to protect you. So there's no such thing as a free market. That's a misnomer by fucking capitalists who want to make you think that what they're doing is somehow in tune, like as if capitalism was invented by Jesus and we found it in nature. It wasn't found in nature. It doesn't exist outside of guys who have shit to sell setting it up. That's what capitalism is. Okay. So here, let me go. You want to say something? No? Okay. So here.
No. I totally agree. I don't see a contradiction in arguments there. I mean, yeah.
Okay, so here is you. So here's what you said to Rachel Maddow, tweeting that out. You said if YouTube were to recommend your show, it'd be recommending the leading purveyor of now debunked Trump Russia conspiracy theories, falsehoods, and innuendo of the last 2.5 years. And here's a sample, and I'm going to tell you, it's more than a sample. You talk about meticulous work. This guy is meticulous on goddamn Twitter. You know, I mean, I'll sit there and think about a half hour how I'm going to word a tweet because I want it to be funny. But those half hour, he's looking up shit. I'm not doing. I'm thinking about the wording. So here he is. There's number 2. He says, just recently, you were caught in real time lying to your audience. You claimed that Barr was handling the redactions by himself, but the Chiron on screen right below told viewers the truth that Mueller was in fact assisting with the redaction. So you can see it. So she was saying in her verbiage was that that Barr was handling the redactions by himself. But during the show, her producers put on the Chiron underneath that Barr was Mueller was assisting Barr with the redactions. So that's the first one.
And Jimmy, by the way, I'm not sure if this was intentional or not, but if you watch that clip, about halfway through, the Chiron switches to something else. So she's talking about, she's saying that Barr is handling the redactions all by himself. And where's Mueller? Where's Mueller? Like, Mueller would have done this. And the Chiron says that Mueller is in fact assisting with the redactions. And at a certain point, about halfway through that clip, the Chiron switches. Whether that was intentional or not, whether they realized that their Chiron was contradicting what she was saying or not, I don't know. But it's a funny scene.
And you know, the sad thing is that the only people holding Rachel Maddow and people like her accountable are people like you and me. And now I'm marginalized because I'm a comedian and on YouTube. And but you're a real award-winning journalist, and you get published in The Nation. So you're like the only person, and they can ignore one person real easily. But there's never going to be another person with a huge platform to go after Rachel Maddow because the people with those huge platforms are pushing the exact same crazy shit that she is.
You know, Jimmy, once I gave up ever having any desire to be on MSNBC. And I was kind of inspired by my friend Max Blumenthal, who said one time, I remember Max saying, he was on Twitter somewhere, he's like, hey, everyone, just so you know, I don't care about going on MSNBC. And I'm not afraid to say what I think. And I realized, you know what, he's got a point there. Like, you know, it's true that, you know, like, it's nice to have exposure. But once you can give up this kind of like liberal dream of being welcomed on MSNBC and, you know, reaching a lot of people, it's liberating because then you can actually say what you think about things. And, you know, from there, I've never looked back. And that's why, I mean, part of the reason why I do this, why I go after MSNBC, and it's not just Rachel Maddow, it's unfortunately Chris Hayes, who I used to really admire, and, you know, other people there too, is because they represent, you know, publicly, you know, so much of the space that challenges Donald Trump. You know, to right wingers, they're seen as the face of the anti-Trump resistance. And as somebody who does not want to see Trump get reelected, who wants a real left and a real alternative to Donald Trump and a real opposition, I don't want to see these people, these unhinged conspiracy theorists who ignore the real issues affecting real people to push, you know, like crazy stuff like this. I don't want that to be the face of what progressive politics is. So that's why it's important to push back on these people. And also because, you know, as Chomsky says, it's important to push back on liberals because they represent the outer limits within the mainstream at which you can criticize the prevailing establishment. So they're the outer limit of what criticism is possible. And if the outer limit is still so constrained and is still actually dangerous because it's warmongering, it's pushing unhinged conspiracy theories, and it's not really challenging Trump and those in power on real issues, then that's extremely dangerous. So it's important to push back and expose these people for who they are and to say that they're not actually a real challenge to Trump. They're not real progressives. They're actually propagandists, and they're propagandists for their own self-interested reasons. So that's why it's important to push back on them and expose them.
All right, so let's go to your third tweet. Your third tweet was, there was the time in January 2017 when you speculated that Putin may use the P-tape and other compromat to force Trump into withdrawing U.S. troops near Russia. How did that one turn out? Well, we know that they've ramped up their troop presence on Russia, including sending warships to the Black Sea, and now he's pulled out of the nuclear treaty that Reagan set up with Gorbachev, and it's the exact opposite, right, of what Rachel was claiming here, correct?
If you watch that clip, it's so crazy. It's in a segment where she goes on about how Russians have used compromat to blackmail people before. She talks about how Trump and Putin have denied the sex tape allegations, but she says that in a real mocking way, like, yeah, sure, and she's making fun of it. And then she goes into this serious sermon here about how we're about to find out if Russia has something on Trump because the U.S. has deployed tens of thousands of troops to Europe, and is Trump going to pull those troops out? And of course, as you say, Jimmy, Trump did the exact opposite. He ramped up the troop presence, but you'll never see that on the Rachel Maddow show. They'll always ignore not just the countervailing evidence of their conspiracy theories, but also countervailing developments that undermine their narrative that Trump is doing Putin's bidding. Because in fact, as you say, Trump has escalated tensions with Russia with his policies, but they ignore that. Because those facts are not convenient to their narrative. So they're depriving people of information that they need to understand that right now Trump is actually escalating tensions with Russia, which is extremely dangerous because as liberals and progressives, we should be challenging that. We should be pushing back on Trump, pulling out of the nuclear treaty and trying to overthrow a government in Venezuela, all these things that go against Russia, because those things escalate tensions, and tensions between nuclear powers are dangerous, existentially dangerous to the entire world.
Okay, so here is yet another one. It says, by the way, just last week you falsely said that the one thing I refused to let myself think about was that Putin had tapes of Trump. The very prospect you had previously floated to posit that Putin may blackmail Trump into withdrawing troops. So explain to me. I'm confused at what you mean by that tweet. Can you explain it to me?
Well, Jimmy, can you play these videos from your computer there? Is that possible or no?
No.
Okay. All right. So basically, last week.
Would that have made this a better segment? Should I have gotten all these videos?
No, it's okay. It's okay. No, basically, last week she revived the P-tape theory.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's completely made up. It was in the dossier. That's completely discredited.
Yeah, well, she revived it because there was a news development, because it was mentioned in the Mueller report, and again, it's a dead end. But because it was mentioned, she revived it and then left out the countervailing information, and then was like, I can't believe we have to think about the possibility that Putin has a P-tape of Trump, and I never wanted to go there. I never once entertained that thought, which in the process of saying that, she's either lying or she's forgetting that she did that whole segment about whether or not Putin will use the P-tape to get Trump to withdraw U.S. forces from Europe.
That's amazing. Here's another one. Who could forget that time this past winter when you seized on life-threatening cold temperatures? Remember the polar vortex? And she fear-mongered that Russia could kill Americans by knocking out their heat and cutting off their natural gas. What if all the natural gas to your houses in Fargo just went poof, she said. Remember that? She said that. Because what if it just went poof? She said that. So that's awesome. We know what that's. We did a video about that. That's up on YouTube. We did it in front of a live audience. That one. That was definitely live audience worthy when she says that Russia will freeze you in the middle of the winter. Number 6, there was that time when you explored the scenario under which Putin gives orders to his puppet Trump at an upcoming meeting. Do you think Putin ordered Trump to stage a coup in Venezuela, try to kill the German-Russia gas pipeline, and nix the INF treaty? Yeah, that's very funny. Number 7, how about that time when you speculated, citing the Steele dossier, that Cohen billed Trump $50,000 for tech services to pay off Russian hackers? It was actually to pay a U.S. firm. Yes. This one was so stupid. So basically, it came out in some court documents that Cohen had submitted an expense of $50,000, and Maddow seized on that and said, "Well, there's a part of the Steele dossier that says that Cohen went to Prague to pay off Russian hackers." And here she was speculating that this was confirmation of that, when of course turned out to be nothing of the sort. Okay. Number 8, how about when you suggested that Putin has gotten Trump to bleed out the FBI? If Mueller and the FBI found proof of that, I missed that part in their report. Unbelievable.
Yeah, the quote there, I'll try to do an impersonation of what she said. This is the exact line. She goes, "The FBI is bleeding out. And she talks about how that's a part of like Putin's goal. Putin's goal is to weaken the U.S. And so she goes, the FBI is bleeding out. As if this was like Putin, as if like Putin is getting Trump to like bleed out the FBI. It's so weird. And this goes on. There's more like that.
Well, here's another one. How about the time when you speculated that Putin installed Rex Tillerson as Secretary of State? How about when you claimed that the White House edited out a key question from the Trump-Putin presser? Then the Washington Post showed that to be false and the result of live video audio switching issue. Yet you never corrected it. She never did correct that. I remember that.
She never corrects anything, and these people never correct anything. They spew outright falsehoods, but nothing ever gets corrected. Nothing.
I've seen that. I've seen that happen. People who push Russiagate never correct themselves ever. And that's what lets me know that I do better journalism than people who consider themselves journalists. They don't do journalism. They're doing propaganda. That's what they're doing. Number 11, then there was that time when you lamented the suspension of the U.S. war games in Korea and speculated that it was the fault of Putin. Oh, I remember that. These are so... number 12, have you ever gotten to the bottom of your new scrutiny of Russia and Trump's inauguration in January 2017, a.k.a. a Russian couple who posted video of their attendance? What was this?
Well, this is an example of like where, all these things are going on under Trump. We have him pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord, pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal, assaulting healthcare, raising taxes, cutting taxes for the wealthy, for corporations, all these assaults on working people. And then you have the top-rated liberal news show, an anchor making millions of dollars a year, and she's focusing on stuff like this, where a Russian couple goes to Trump's inauguration, posts a video online, and now it's new scrutiny on Russians at Trump's inauguration. Like, as if this is an issue, the fact that there was a Russian couple at Trump's inauguration, like, who cares? But this is an example of what the top, resistance network was focused on. It's such an abrogation of journalism and of duty just as a citizen, focus on real issues that impact people's lives. And now we're thinking about this Russian couple at Trump's inauguration. It's insane.
So, again, I just want to real quickly ask you again, what was it that we met? So this was always inside Rachel Maddow to be worse than Glenn Beck. She always had it inside her, and it just needed the right foil. She just needed the right adversary to reveal her, just like Keith Olbermann and everybody else who pushed Russiagate at the top of it, to reveal them to be unhinged maniacs at any given moment. And given the situation, Rachel Maddow could be worse than Glenn Beck.
I don't want to psychoanalyze them, but I think all these people identify with the neoliberal Democratic elite. 2016 was an unequivocal rejection of the neoliberal Democratic elite and all that they stand for. And these people didn't know what to do. They couldn't handle it. They're incapable of self-reflection, of even saying, geez, maybe if Hillary Clinton had campaigned in Michigan and Wisconsin, maybe she would have had a better shot. And of course, maybe if Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and Bill Clinton didn't have the economic record that they had, maybe they could have reached voters in Michigan and Wisconsin. But they're incapable of those thoughts. And so they had to switch to a narrative that was convenient. And Russia was the one that was presented to them. It was presented to them by the people around Clinton, and it was presented to them by people in the national security state who opposed Trump, not because they didn't like Trump's policies that hurt working people or because they didn't like Trump's misogyny and racism, but because they didn't like that Trump was saying he wanted to get along with Russia. And they didn't see Trump as a suitable steward of the war machine that they're in charge of. And so, this was the way for them to oppose Trump, and they lost their minds in the process. That's the best explanation I can come up with. And of course, pushing this was profitable for them. Chris Hayes, his show didn't always have the best ratings, but in pushing, he jumped on the conspiracy theory. I mean, whether he meant it sincerely or not, I don't know, but he jumped on the conspiracy theory. It helped his ratings. So this thing was profitable for them. That's the best way that I can explain it.
So I just want to really quickly, I know you don't want to psychoanalyze these people, but that's what we need to do. And do you know anybody who could do that? All right. Anyway.
Well, you know what? I actually do. You know what? I actually just did an interview with Dr. Gabor Mate, who's a physician and an author. He's also my father, and he writes about mental health and psychology a lot, and the intersection with that in politics. And we actually just did a 30-minute interview, sort of psychoanalyzing Russiagate and looking at why it was so appealing to not just pundits like Maddow, but why it took hold amongst people who are legitimately afraid by Trump's victory. So we're going to be releasing that soon on the Gray Zone, which is Max Blumenthal's outlet, and that'll be out soon. And so you maybe want to have him on to discuss it. It's certainly, I agree, we can't understand the prevalence of Russiagate without understanding the psychological angle to it. So I think it's an important line of inquiry.
So so we can go on. You have at least 8 more of these, but I want to stop, and I don't have this loaded into the show, but I want to read to you the tweet that I've been remarking about Chris Hayes made last week on the 18th of April. He says, back during the Civil War, there were people who took basically a kind of anti-slavery position. To be sure, they'd say they didn't like slavery, obviously, but the abolitionists were deranged, the Northern establishment corrupt, Lincoln a scourge to civil liberties. I never heard of these people, by the way. Did they exist, Aaron? Is he making this up? Did those people exist? Is he just making that up? So he's trying to say that there were people who were against.
No. He's right. There were these people, but what he's doing is he's putting his Ivy League education to use and trying to come up with a fancy way to smear people who are critical of the failed conspiracy theory that he pushed for 2 years. And he's comparing us now to people who are anti-slavery. It's just, this is one of the most disgusting things I've seen tweeted in a long time. And, he's basically saying that because we didn't buy into the conspiracy theory that he did, the one that, by the way, gave Trump a massive reelection gift, that we're comparable to anti-slavery. I mean, it's insulting on so many levels. I'm not even sure to know where to begin.
So back during the Civil War, there were people who took basically a kind of anti-slavery position. To be sure, they'd say they didn't like slavery, obviously, but the abolitionists were deranged, the Northern establishment corrupt, Lincoln scourge to the civil liberties. So what he's doing is trying to say that people like Aaron Mate and myself and Max Blumenthal and Kyle Kalinske and Glenn Greenwald, we're the people who were against slavery, but we were also against the people who were trying to stop slavery. Get it? That's not the same. You weren't trying to stop Trump. You were actually propping him up. The people who were trying to stop slavery were actually stopping slavery. So there's a difference, right? So what you were doing, Chris Hayes, was the opposite of what the people who were stopping slavery were doing. You were actually propping up Trump because you were pushing a bullshit thing. They weren't pushing bullshit. All right. Anyway, here's the next thing he says. Some of the critiques were even true. Some of the critiques were even true, but they also knew what they were doing and which side they were on. And their allegiances, no matter their protestations, are written into history. So what he's saying there is that Aaron Mate, because he had journalistic standards and wasn't willing to lie for a political party, that he's a traitor. That Aaron Mate is now on Trump's side and Chris Hayes is on the right side, even though he's admitting he's been lying. Is that what he's doing there, Aaron?
Yeah, his conspiracy theory has failed. And instead of saying, you know what, maybe we did this wrong. Maybe we shouldn't have pushed above everything else this narrative that Trump and Putin conspired and that Trump was compromised by Putin and the blackmail leverage that Putin had over him. Maybe it was a mistake for us to prioritize that above all the real policies that Trump is enacting that are harmful to the country. And maybe this was a mistake also because us focusing on this so much distracted attention from those policies. And then when our conspiracy theory collapsed, it gave Trump a massive reelection gift. Instead of acknowledging that, instead of displaying some minimal humility, Chris goes and does this thing where he likens us to being anti-slavery with his lofty rhetoric and trying to invoke history because he's read a bunch of Civil War books. It's really pathetic. And, if he had any decency, he'd say, yeah, we made a mistake and I've learned from it and we're going to move on and try to do better. But instead he attacks those who got it right. And, he leaves out the fact that, again, as I've said, I mean, this was good. There's a reason why they focused on this so much. It was good for their ratings. This conspiracy thriller was good for MSNBC's ratings. It wasn't doing so hot a few years ago, but being able to push every single day this spy thriller narrative of, international espionage and intrigue and Trump and Putin secretly conspiring and that Robert Mueller was going to save us all. I mean, it was good for them. And Chris, whatever his intentions were initially, he went into this full on. He doubled down on it. He became not that far off from Maddow. And now he's blaming us for its collapse, and he's trying to smear us this way. It speaks for itself.
Yeah, he's what they call an overeducated moron, right? Because he had to read all those books to use all these smart words to be wrong. And that's, that just goes to show you what's more important, Aaron, intelligence or courage and integrity? Well, obviously, we know what's more important, courage and intelligence. Intelligence is not that important because I don't have it. And yet I was able to get this story right and I didn't mislead my audience. Whereas Chris Hayes has all the intelligence in the world, lacks courage and lacks integrity. He has no character. I said to somebody who was pushing Russiagate at the top of their lungs on their, and I said, you don't have any, if you had any character, you'd be apologizing to me and trying to ask how you can make it up to me. And then it was like, how could you say I don't have character? What the fuck? Are you kidding me? And that's what Chris Hayes is doing. Chris Hayes doesn't have any character. He doesn't have any you said if he had any decency. You know what that means? He doesn't have any decency. Chris Hayes doesn't have any decency. And that's the kind of piece of shit that they hire at MSNBC. And that's why the country's in the fucking position it's in, is because the fourth estate is not the fourth estate. It's part of the fucking establishment estate, which is what it's always been. But now it's been ramped up on steroids ever since Bill Clinton passed the 1996 Telecommunications Act. That's really the demise of this country. It's not RT. It's not Trump. It's not fucking Putin. It's us right here. It's our corporate state and pieces of shit like Chris Hayes and Rachel Maddow that cheer it on and then shame people who are truth tellers. That's how bad it's gotten at MSNBC, that he's now smearing people who are winning awards on the fucking very stories he's falling down on the job on. That's the kind of piece of shit Chris Hayes is. And they're all that way. And if Chris Hayes had any decency, had any integrity, he would have fucking left that place when they fired Ed Schultz. But he doesn't have any integrity and he doesn't have any decency. And you know who does? Aaron Matei does. That's why he wins awards for his fucking reporting, and not from other pricks either. He doesn't win an Emmy from other fucking jagoffs on TV, okay? Because Emmys are fucking worthless. You know what an Emmy is? It's like getting a blowjob for getting a hand job. That's what an Emmy is, okay? It's fucking worthless, and they're just backslapping bullshit from other assholes. That's all that is, okay? So
Jimmy, I just want to say, don't want to get into a debate with you about human nature, but I just want to say that I believe there's decency in everybody. There's also cynicism in everybody. And
where's the decency in Chris? Where does he put the decency when he does that tweet? Where did he put it?
Well, he suppresses it, of course.
Oh, he suppresses it. But he has it.
Well, I'm just saying generally, I believe there's decency in everybody.
Chuck Manson
different institutions, and circumstances promote different aspects of our human nature. That's all I wanted to say about that.
No, you got it. You'll bump into Chris Hayes at the convention or something, and so he won't take a swing at you. But because he is tall, he's much taller than I thought he was. Anyway, so we'll just end it there. We've talked enough. I don't want to go back to Rachel's horrible fuckingness and to show it again, because it just makes me upset. This makes me upset. Chris Hayes should be he should be putting the stockades in public square. Isn't that what they used to do? They'd put you in a stockade. What did they do?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. He talk about P-tape. Somebody should urinate on him for this. Definitely. He's definitely got a golden shower coming for this, because I bet you anybody, this is total speculation, but I'm going to guess Chris Hayes is a scat muncher. I bet it he fucking munches scat. You
what
know
does
what I
that
mean?
mean?
That means that he eats shit for sexual gratification.
Okay, all right.
Jimmy!
All right. I shouldn't have asked that. I shouldn't have asked that question.
Do you think what I just said is worse than what he said?
Do I think No, I don't think we.
No, it's not. In fact, it's not. No. It's not worse than what he said. What he said is worse than what I said.
That doesn't mean I endorse it.
I know you don't endorse it. I know you do. You're a real journalist. I'm a comedian. Of course you don't endorse it. Everyone knows you don't endorse the shit I say. You don't have to. You don't have to answer for the shit I say. That's fun. I'm here trying to make you laugh. That's what I'm doing because I know you don't agree with the shit I say. But that's the freedom I allow myself. You know that Max Blumenthal moment? I had that moment. Remember that moment you had with him when he said, "I don't want to be on MSNBC," and the light went off. I was on Joe Rogan's show the first time. And he was talking about, I forget what it was he was talking about. And I go, aren't you afraid that people are going to discredit you about this, that you talk about this? And he goes, discredit me? He goes, I announce guys fighting in cages. I smoke the pot. I'm not a respectable person, Jimmy. They can't do anything to me. And I was like, oh my fucking God, that's who I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be you. That was my whole life's plan. And somehow I got in this position where I have to worry about what I said. And ever since then, I've been fucking on this path to not worry about. And that's why I have to remind myself, I don't want to be in that club. I couldn't give a fuck what they think. Their club is corrupt. Their club is this. Their club smears people who do journalism well. That's the club they're in. So fuck their club. Fuck CNN and Washington Post and Chris Hayes and almost every, except for The Nation, fuck every establishment publication too. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say, Jimmy, it's working because you're attracting a lot of followers. People rely on you now to provide the information they're not getting elsewhere. And that's, I think, a reflection of the fact that you take people seriously. You take people's concerns seriously, and you don't try to box yourself into this really confining and nullifying partisan box. And that's why you're reaching people. You're reaching people on all sides. I know that, you know, like even you have people who support Trump or who are conservative, who aren't left-wing like you are, come to you because they at least admire the fact that you're honest and you're honest about your views. And people are lacking honesty right now. And so when they can get it, it's really appreciated. And I think it speaks to why you've been so successful.
Next live Jimmy Dore show is June 5th. That's a Wednesday at Hermosa Beach Comedy Club in Hermosa Beach, California. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all tickets. We might be coming to your town. And if you love the show, please become a patron. Please support the show. We give you hours of bonus material every week. And please click that bell to make sure you're subscribed. Even if you think you are already subscribed, they unsubscribe people every day. Just check. Thanks for your support.